Based on the work of Carl Jung and the field of depth psychology, we come together in the cauldron of psyche to stir the depths and to be stirred by the depths we find here. This year, we prioritized lecture topics that explore the roots of authoritarianism to help us better understand the trend in our national politics and beyond. Tonight, Randall Mishoe considers the archetype represented by the Norse god Wotan. Next month, on Friday, November 1st, just days before the national election, Penelope Tarasuk will guide our focus inward to steady and gather ourselves around the topic of wounding and healing. Looking ahead, we are hungry to meet in person again. Before COVID, we had a wonderful in-person film and discussion group, which we will be offering again soon. So if you are local, please stay tuned for details. And I have a special appeal tonight to all of you to consider serving on our board. Producing this lecture series is uncomplicated and interesting. One or two of the board jobs could be done remotely. If we are to continue next year, we must add a couple of new board members this year. If you are like me, you prefer to stay on the sidelines until someone tags you. And we are happy to do that if we suspect that you are interested. But please be bold and reach out to me with your interest. You would be joining a group of wonderful people. Contact me at my email, which is posted below in the chat, or on the website under Board of Directors. Finally, following the lecture, you are invited to stay for a few minutes for community conversation, just to have a chance to share about the presentation. And now my fellow board member, Elric Walker, will introduce tonight's speaker.
Thank you, Christine. Dr. Randall Mishoe is a graduate of Clemson University, Southeastern Seminary, Harvard University, and Andover Newton Theological School, which pioneered in the integrative studies of spirituality, psychology, theology, and education in relation to the field of medicine. From Andover Newton Theological School, Dr. Mishoe received the professional degree of Doctor of Ministry in Psychology and Clinical Studies with an emphasis in Jungian psychology. His postgraduate work was at the C.G. Jung Institute of New England, from which he received his diploma in analytical psychology. His work history encompasses a very wide range of experiences. He has been a high school math teacher, an officer in the U.S. Army Field Artillery with service in Korea. He's been a campus minister, a local church pastor, and a psychotherapist in private practice for the last 35 years. Among other professional affiliations, Dr. Mishoe is a member of the International Association of Analytical Psychology, the Association for Clinical Pastoral Education, and the North Carolina Association of Pastoral Counselors that maintains recognized standards for the practice of psychotherapy. His publications include Musing in Search of Meaning, which is available through Amazon. And speaking of musing in search of meaning, I would also like to direct you to Dr. Mishoe's website, randallmishoe.com, where you will find some wonderful and deeply thoughtful articles published there on his blog. And now, without further ado, I would like to welcome and introduce to you Dr. Randall Mishoe.
Thank you, Eric. Well said there in terms of, I think you touched all the bases. No wonder I feel tired, given all these places I've been and things I've done, but it is all true. And I would say a very, very meaningful time which probably would explain to many of you why we become Jungian analysts. And Jung himself, you see, had so many interests, and his groundbreaking work explored many of them in mythology and fairy tales and religion and social events and what have you. It's a privilege to be a part of this community, and it's a special privilege to be with a group such as yours. As I've had the privilege in my lifetime of living in different sections of the country, not only in the Carolinas, but in New England, which is one of my favorite places in all the world. And I lived for a time in Malden, Massachusetts. And we had a wonderful time, and our daughter was in love with that place. And when we then moved to California, I thought we were going to have to tie her up and throw her in the car. She wanted to stay there. And so she's had the privilege of Carolina and New England and a California experience as well. We presently have a granddaughter, and she is a sophomore now at the University of California in San Diego. So, the drumbeat keeps going, and the family, our little small family, we continue to do our thing, and it's always a privilege, and it's more of a privilege as I travel around to meet with groups such as yours and to hear of your interest in Jung and your bringing together what Jung has to offer with this very troubled world in which we are living. Um, I was talking with Peter about this some time ago when I was observing what was taking place in our society and the world. And I thought, what the heck is happening? And how do we understand this? It's not business as usual. Certainly, there are some personalities that we can put our finger on and say, here is an issue, but it's more than that. And then Jung had encouraged us to look and see what might be the archetypal dynamics that are involved. And as I will say later on in the presentation, that brought up then the whole matter of Wotan. And then I discovered, lo and behold, he had written an essay on that. And so I was talking about that with Peter, and the question was then what presentation I might make. I'm sure it was maddening for Peter as he was trying to nail me down with exactly what the presentation would be. And honestly, I realized it was problematic because the ball keeps bouncing, you see. And within my frame of orientation, it's important to me to be as specific as I can about what we are dealing with in any given moment here. And I thought, now this is a very dangerous moment in which we're living. How do we understand it? How are we going to cope with it? How do we even name it? And I was attempting to talk about that with Peter, and from there, to the question then of, well, so Jung has given us a name, Wotan. I'll say more about that, and I'm thinking about Wotan, and then from there I thought about the archetype of war, and then what comes with that, and the feeling there of entitlement and aggrandizement, and so that led then to the program that we have here tonight. It's been a long way in coming around, but it has to do with sorting through the dynamics in our society, but also the dynamics deeply within our psyche, and to look at how those dynamics impact individuals, and impact society at large. And Jung incredibly helped us to deal with that. So that's my focus here tonight. I have, because I think of my training, but also my indebtedness to Jungian psychology and to the great mystery of the work that Jung did and the grand frame in which he provided us to say, we can name certain things. and we can name certain dynamics in not only our personal life, but in our families and in our society. And I think we must do that and try to be as conscious as we possibly can about it. So that led me then to go back and to reread Jung's wonderful, wonderful essay in his collected works on Wotan. In the event that you have not read that, let me encourage you to do so, and I think you'll be greatly rewarded for it. And I'll say more about that as we go on. So then, what I plan to do tonight is to present some slides, and we'll just slowly move through them and with the rationale for why that slide is presented. And then I will maybe, with the help of Andrew, I might interrupt at any time and make some special comment about those slides. But we'll take it from there and see where we go. And then at the end, you will have whatever questions. I'll be happy to address them as well as I possibly can. So with that then having been said, if we can get our technology to work here, I would like now at this point then to turn your attention here to Wotan and what the archetype of war is all about, maybe in our lives, in our psyche, and in our society today. Let's see if we can catch a glimpse of this. And I should be having Wotan, and I don't see Wotan anywhere in here. Here we go. Maybe this is it. Here we go. So, so this is, I'm going to take away my side view here, so I don't think you need that. I might come back to that later on. See, I'm going to do the slide only. This is one sketch of Wotan. It's a striking image, I think. You'll see him there with his spear, and you'll see the dragon behind him that protects his power, his wealth. You'll see the ravens, which go out into the world and bring back special secret information to him. You'll see the wolves. It's a striking image here of Wotan. I have not been able to locate the name of the artist who did this. It's a remarkable image. If I ever get that name, I'll certainly give it credit. Sometimes Wotan is also referred to as Odin. So here, that is the one of the images, and of course, you know, this is an archetypal power, and you know, it doesn't have a face, but an inspired artist does his or her best to present it, and that's what we have. Now, we then came up, as I was talking with Peter, about a subtitle for this presentation, Wotan, the Archetype of War and the Authoritarian Impulse. I was struggling and coming up with the title for Peter. You know, I think that that subtitle there of the authoritarian impulse was so crucial to explain what is very obvious in our world today. But also, we cannot get away from the fact here that war looms on the horizon. I think about the Middle East. And as I was going over this presentation again, I was thinking, my gosh, you know, maybe the dynamics in the Middle East make what's going on in our little neighborhood here pale by comparison. And yet is I think, the same archetypal dynamic that's at work. And so with that then, we come now to this incredible statement that was made by Carl Jung. He did this in his first film interview. Some of you may have had the privilege of seeing that and hearing him, the very old man, and you know, very tentatively and hesitantly, but powerfully saying this, that the world hangs on a thin thread. That is the psyche of man, of course, using the language of that time. That is the psyche of man. What if something goes wrong with the psyche? What if something goes wrong with the psyche? Well, then, you know, we may say, well, come on. What could possibly go wrong with the psyche? I mean, you know, many in our world still live in the aftermath of Ronald Reagan when he described our society, our country, our people, our values. He said, "We are the shining city on the hill." That was an understanding of our country at that time. And and so you and I would say, well, okay, so very good. So you know, we don't have to worry about that. Yeah, what in the world is Jung talking about? This thin thread that the world hangs on, which is the psyche, and what could possibly go wrong with this? That's what, you know, we were wondering about that. You know, surely nothing can go wrong with it. Oops. And then lo and behold, something happens here. And we have a character who takes such a dominant place in our society and has continued to do so for some time now. And so we are likely, and I'll say, I question this later on as we go on, but we are likely to say, well, you know, it is about a personality. We could say so much of our uncertainty is about a personality. Well, and you know, he certainly has encouraged that, because remember what Donald Trump did say. And he made that very clear. And you got to respect the honesty with which he makes these things clear. And he said he will be a dictator on the day of his second term. He's been very clear about that. What does that mean, to be a dictator? I don't know that many people realize the scope of this. As someone who has served as an officer in the United States Army, with service in Korea, responsibility there with troops and with the protection of our national interests, I'm well aware of what it means then for a president who will be, and presidents become this, as president, Trump will be commander-in-chief of all the armed forces, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Space Force, and the National Guard. The presidents automatically become the commanders. He can also declare a state of emergency, and he can federalize all the National Guard units, thereby bringing them under his command. In addition, Trump can call on the paramilitary groups, such as the Proud Boys. And you understand now, he is not just president, he is the commander-in-chief of these forces. This would provide the next president, whoever that would be, but certainly Trump if he's reelected, this would provide Trump the greatest military force in the world. The greatest military force in the world at his call. And you would say, well, but they won't go along with that. You know, it does not work that way. To the credit of the officers' corps, they respect their commander. And unlike some military groups, I have never known of a situation in which the United States military corps and the officers would disobey an order of a commander. It's not that they blindly are following that, but they believe that their commanders have their best interests in mind. So this is what will Trump or whomever it will be, the commander-in-chief of all of these forces. Also, he can encourage citizens then to spy on their neighbors and their friends, and thereby divide the civilian force, and in that division, have some of them to support him as well. And consolidating his power then, be mindful of this. Not only then is he commander of all the military forces, All of that is at his fingertips. In addition, Trump or whomever is president can take control of, one should not do this, but one can take control of all federal agencies. Typically, they have their autonomy. But the leader with the wrong intent could take control of these federal agencies and could retaliate against his personal enemies. He could round up and remove undesirables that he believes might pollute the blood of our country, to use his phrase there. He could jail and execute political opposition. And he could implement Project 2025, a political initiative that was created by the very conservative think tank there in California. And if you have read it all or even heard about implementing Project 25, it is a very frightening document which gets to undercut what the freedom of our country and our ideals would be. In short, Trump will create the greatest police state that the world has ever known. The greatest police state. This would become a police state. And Trump will be the greatest, most powerful of all the world's dictators, individuals that he admires most and that he wishes to emulate. That is what would be involved with the police state that would come into being. How did this happen? What kind of person is this? Surely we are overestimating him or underestimating him or not understanding him. What is this about? Now, for those of you in our group, Penelope and others, therapists who've had, your training, and we all understand psychopathology, and we have been taught to recognize personality disorders and to deal with them in an appropriate way. And so and it's almost a common understanding. You hear this often referring to Trump and his narcissism, because it's quite obvious that Donald Trump lives and swims in a muddled state of mind, which we could describe as a narcissistic personality disorder. I don't know how it was with those of you who are therapists and how your training unfolded. It took some time for me to come to grips with psychopathology. I think that was because a part of my heritage was I was taught by my family to expect the best in people and to believe that people are good and to believe that we are all wanting to do the best for everyone. And so I would expect that of people. It was a kind of a jarring thing for me when one of my analysts, when I was in analysis, said, well, now, have you ever read the DSM-4? And I thought, what? The Diagnostic Statistical Manual? Yeah, she says, have you looked at that section where they are talking about personality disorders? I said, no, I never paid a lot of attention to that. And she said, you might need to do that. And so I got out the DSM-4, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, and I looked up all the personality disorders, 7 or 8 of them at that time, I think it was. And lo and behold, a narcissistic personality. I thought, oh boy, that is a mess. What is a narcissistic personality? And so what would we understand then by Trump and as a narcissistic personality disorder? See if I can move to these here so I can read these. Let's see if I can get my IT department here to help me. Here we go. There we go. So Alan Francis was he is a psychiatrist. He taught psychiatry at Duke University Medical School, and he has written 2 or 3 marvelous books. And he was head of the task force that created the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, the 4th one there. He talks about that in some of his writings, and how he had to be very careful about, what does it mean to project pathology upon people? And how do we go about understanding that? And Alan Francis then wrote this marvelous description here of a narcissistic personality disorder. I will go over this with you because it is quite descriptive and I think to the point. These people, the narcissists, these patients are the center of their worlds, special in every way, show-offs and name droppers, legends in their own minds. Their sense of self-importance and entitlement crowds out any worries about the needs, the troubles, or the feelings of others. They are haughty, high-minded, and feel superior, and expect others to show deference and admiration. Frequent disappointments follow when the world fails to live up to their impossibly unrealistic expectations. Is that not a marvelous, marvelous description of a narcissistic personality disorder? But it took some time for me to realize something else here that was going on. And that was something that I think I had to come to grips with here. And that is that there is another way of understanding that. And that is that narcissists also are able to hide their feelings of inferiority. So I want to, if I can now slide down to the next one here, I want to be able to show that to you. Let me see if I can get that here. Here we go. Let's see if this gets it for me. If not, I may have to have help here. I'm going to share here. And now let's see if something's going on.
Try the arrow key in the lower right corner of your keypad.
The arrow key in the lower right corner of the tin. I don't know what's going on with that. So, Andrew, what do you think I might need to do to come back and get that operating here? I can go here to the view, but that doesn't show me. Okay, wait just a minute here. I'm going to come here and try this again, okay? Nope. Okay, I got to try one more time. Then if I can't get that, I'm going to tell you what I have here.
Randall, use the navigator. There you go.
There we go. There we go. There we go. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and now, so that means then, let's get this on, that narcissism, and this was a thing I did not understand. And I knew that I was dealing in my work with an individual that I could easily say, well, this is a narcissist. But what I didn't understand, and my supervisor said to me, well, are you aware of the 2 dynamics in the unconscious of these people? What are they? Inferiority and superiority, you see. Both of those are at play. The inferior narcissist yearns for power to compensate his or her fear of inferiority and inadequacy. Thus, he or she becomes vulnerable to becoming seized by the archetype of power. Now, this archetype of power can seize an individual. It can seize a group of people. It can seize a family. It can seize a nation, you see. And so we may say, well, this is a narcissistic personality. And we think that's all about feeling superior. Not true. Not true. The dynamic of inferiority, the opposites there are at play, inferiority and superiority. So the inferior narcissist then yearns for power to compensate the fear of inferiority and inadequacy. Well, then that, you see, explains what happens with some groups who feel inferior, some families who feel inferior, some individuals, but also even some nations. And that was, I think, Jung's genius when he realized, wait, that's what explains what happened to Germany. Now, if I can get my technology to work here, I want to show you then what that looks like. So hang with me. Here we are. And here's Germany. And look at this.
World affairs. And that power waves its flags in Berlin as the Nazi regime celebrates its third anniversary. 30,000 stormtroop veterans, and Hitler speaks.
Alles, was ihr seid, seid ihr durch mich. Und alles, was ich bin ich nur durch euch allein.
Every chancellor in Europe takes notice as Hitler tells the enemies of Nazi Germany that they are against him not because of his ideas, but because he has made Germany powerful. And his veterans cheer.
Die Feuer! Die Feuer! Die Feuer!
So there you see then what happens in that case where a country is taken over by this experience. And let me see, Jung says, writing in 1936, he said, it was not politics, it was not economics, it was not psychology that explained what seized the German people. Rather, it was Wotan, the archetype of war, hubris, and authoritarianism. So he goes on then to say, let me close this down here if I can. He goes on to say, Jung that is now, but what is more than curious is that an ancient god of storm and frenzy, the long quiescent Wotan, should awake like an extinct volcano to new activity in a civilized country that had long been supposed to have outgrown the Middle Ages. So you and I ask, what happened to the German people? How did they lose their mind and become possessed by Wotan? But we also then have to go ahead and ask, what has happened to us? How did we lose our minds and make possible the election of Donald Trump and the possession of our minds by the god of war and power and the possible re-election of Donald Trump? What has happened to us that we do not support our Constitution, our democratic institutions, our ideals of life, liberty, and the pursuit of justice? What has happened to us? Now we come back then to this beginning statement there of Carl Jung, when he said, the world hangs on a thin thread, and that is the psyche of man. What if something goes wrong with the psyche? In other words, you see, our problem is really not Donald Trump, politics, economics, or psychology. The problem we're facing in our society and maybe in our own lives, in our families and our institutions, the problem is our psyche, as Jung warned us. We lost our mind when it was seized by the archetype of war and authoritarianism. That's what has happened to us. Now we want then to look then at what that means when we consider then the follow-up to that, and that is, what an archetype is and how that plays out in our life. This, pardon this is somewhat, I'd say, academic, not for you people necessarily, but we have to appreciate what this really means. You see, the genius of Carl Jung was, he took it a step further than Sigmund Freud. He said, but we also are dealing not only with the personal unconscious, we are dealing with the collective unconscious. And within the collective unconscious, you see, that is the realm of the archetypal powers. This was his great contribution to our understanding of depth psychology, a contribution which has yet to be appropriated and appropriately taught in schools and understood by our leadership. And it is this, as Jung would say, he said, an archetype is like an old watercourse along which the water of life has flowed for centuries, digging a deep channel for itself. The longer it has flowed in this channel, the more likely it is that sooner or later the water will return to its old bed. The life of the individual as a member of society, and particularly as part of the state, may be regulated like a canal, but the life of nations is a great rushing river which is utterly beyond human control. And then he goes on. And thus, the life of nations rolls on unchecked, without guidance, unconscious of where it is going, like a rock crashing down the side of a hill until it is stopped by an obstacle stronger than itself. Political events move from one impasse to the next, like a torrent caught in a gully, creek, and marsh. All human control comes to an end when the individual is caught in a mass movement. Then the archetypes begin to function, as happens also in the lives of individuals when they are confronted with situations that cannot be dealt with in any of the familiar ways. So this helps you and me to look then at what has unfolded. When did we lose our minds? Like the people of Nazi Germany who lost their minds when they became possessed by Wotan. So we today shoulder the weight of an oppressive force that possesses our minds and distorts our world. In other words, the natural order of life has been broken. We are living as if in a nightmare that does not end because of the fragmentation of our natural order. Now, I'm going to try to illustrate what I mean here by telling you a story. And this is a one. Let me see if I can get back and see you people here. Let me see if I can. Can we make my contact here? Okay. You know, this was one of Carl Jung's favorite stories. And he loved stories, like he loved mythologies and he loved fairy tales. And he would tell this story over and over and over again. And it became a ritual within the seminars he would be leading. And he would say things like, have I ever told you the story of the Rainmaker? And that would be the cue for them to say, no, what is the story of the Rainmaker? And then he would proceed to tell them the story of the Rainmaker one more time. So that's what we're going to be looking at here, the story of the Rainmaker. If I can find it again here. See, where might we be? What happened to my Rainmaker story? I don't know. Here we go. So here's the story of the Rainmaker. By the way, this story came to Carl Jung in an interesting way. There was a young man, Richard Wilhelm, whose parents were missionaries to China. And they were quite informed, very progressive people, and they said they made it a point never to convert anybody. So their agenda was not to convert, but I think to befriend and to support in every way that they could the individuals that they knew there. So they had this son, Richard, and he became interested in Chinese culture, and then he wanted to understand that. And to understand that, then he began to read Carl Jung, and he studied archetypes, and that brought him then to Zurich, and he introduced himself, and he and Jung became quite close, and he told Jung many stories. So this is a story then that Richard Wilhelm brought to Carl Jung from his experience there in China, and this is the story. There was a great drought, and the situation became catastrophic. The Catholics made processions, the Protestants made prayers, and the Chinese burned joss sticks and shot off guns to frighten away the demons of the drought, but with no result. Finally, the Chinese said, "We will fetch the rainmaker." And from another province, a dried up old man appeared, and the only thing he asked for was a quiet little house somewhere, and there he locked himself in for 3 days. On the 4th day, the clouds gathered, and there was a great snowstorm at the time of that year, when no snow was expected, an unusual amount. And the town was so full of rumors about this wonderful rainmaker that they went to ask the man, "How in the world did you do that?" "They call you the rainmaker. Will you tell us how you made the snow?" And the little man said, I did not make the snow. I'm not responsible." "But what have you done these 3 days?" "Oh, I can explain that. I came from another country where things are in order. Here, they are out of order. They are not as they should be by the ordinance of heaven. Therefore, the whole country is not in Tao. And I also am not in the natural order of things because I am in a disordered country. So I had to wait 3 days until I was back in Tao. And then naturally, the rain came." Wonderful story. It's told many times, and this happens with stories. These archetypal stories, they begin to take on a life of their own. And some even elaborate to say, well, so, the little man, the little rainmaker, he comes into this village, and of course, they want to put him in the finest house, the house where the mayor is, the house where the people of outstanding means are. And they located him there in that house there in the middle of the village. But he would not stay there. He said, no, 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 no. There was a little house out there on the edge of the village, and I would like to go and be there. Now, you and I then are apt to draw from that. He was staying away from the center of power, the center of control, the center of domination, which was concerned about guarding their boundaries and fighting anybody who would come near them and what have you. He doesn't want to be caught in that. So he has to leave that now. And he says, the problem is the village is not in the Tao. And I also am not in the natural order of things because I am in a disordered country. So I had to wait 3 days until I was back in Tao. And then naturally, the rain came. So now, this brings you and me to a very, very interesting question. And that is the question of the Tao. What is it? Well, you and I may think of the Tao simply as the way, a Chinese word referring to a road, a path, or even a spiritual and philosophical understanding of one's life and purpose. You know, we might just simplistically understand it as that. Or we might go further and look at a psychological understanding. And from this vantage point, you and I then may come to understand Tao as a centering of body, mind, and spirit that unifies one's heaven-given authority to be oneself with the consciousness to use one's power in behalf of creation. What a wonderful thing it is to be authentically oneself. What a wonderful thing it is to be able to recognize that is a situation of authority. I do have power. I do have means. And most of all, I have authority to be myself. And with that, a consciousness to use my power in behalf of creation. But you and I must be very cautious here. And remember the words of Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching, remember? And there in the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu reminds us, the Tao that can be talked about is not the true Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. That comes from chapter 1. And so, with that caution, Lao Tzu mounts his water buffalo and he rides in front of us then to face Wotan, war, and the authoritarian impulse. And here he goes. Very well. With that, then, I will pause and ask for any questions, and we can have a discussion then about anything I've said or about further ideas about this archetype of war and authoritarianism that has so made problems for us at this time when we're living now. Anything to say about that?
Go ahead, Elric, open your mic.
Yeah, that was wonderful, first of all, but I wanted to say that just to add that the Zen master Suzuki said that when you sit zazen, the world is in zazen.
Yes.
This is the principle that you're pointing to.
Yes.
And it's interesting because it's also in keeping with the whole idea of Jungian psychology in that the work is internal that affects the external.
Yes.
So that one needs to do the work oneself on the self, and this changes the world. It also brings to mind the Fisher King in the Grail legends.
Yes.
Who was waiting for someone to ask him the appropriate question.
Right.
And as he is wounded, and in his wound, the kingdom around him is also failing until such time as he gets the right question and his healing begins from within and goes outward. The other thing I wanted to mention was, what was it? Oh, I thought you were going, when you were going to quote the Tao Te Ching, I thought you were going to what Lao Tzu said when he said, do you think you can change the world?
Right.
I say you will only ruin it.
Yep.
Just leave it.
Love that. Yep. Love that. I think, Eric, you know, the Zen Buddhists, I think, get that more than many groups. I never forget, my wife Deborah and I went to the Zen Mountain Monastery in New York. Some of you may have been there. Very wonderful, wonderful community. At any rate, so we signed up for a whole week of sitting Zen. My God, I thought I would die. But it was such a marvelous experience of being able to center down and you can run, but you can't hide. And there you are on that cushion there for several times a day. It was intense. But I think Zen practitioners get this point pretty well.
I would just want to add this one point that Carl Jung said. Carl Jung said, I'm approximating what he said. I don't know the exact quote, but he said the most powerful thing that you can do to change the world of politics or whatever, is to individuate and become whole.
Yes.
So as we look at these external forces in the world, really, we need to do what the Rainmaker did, in a sense.
Yes.
To go within and attenuate ourselves to the way, to the flow of reality, and be centered in that place of presence. That's probably the most powerful thing that any of us can do.
Which is what you people are about there, what you provide for your community. And that is the opportunity to read and to study and to participate in their process of individuation. What a wonderful thing to make available for a community. Wonderful.
Mm.
Other questions, other thoughts, other ideas? Thank you, Eric.
I have
Go
a
ahead,
question.
Christine,
Oh,
and then we'll go to Erica.
Erica was next.
Erica, go ahead.
Okay. Randall, it's my understanding that Jung actually helped the CIA understand understand Hitler,
Yes.
how he was caught in the archetype.
Yes.
He said that he saw Mussolini and Stalin and they were horrible and thugs and awful, but Hitler scared him because Hitler wasn't there. He was possessed by Wotan. Can you say more about that?
Well, I think that is true, and we certainly don't have all the full information there about that exchange. But yes, indeed, he was working on behalf of our own agencies to gather as much information. And I think wonderfully well, they said, help us to understand this man, Hitler. What in the world is going on within him and the German people? And they turned to Jung to do that. And he did the best that he could. But we don't have access to the full file of the information that he provided. The little bit that we do have is that I think he placed him within the realm of the fascism, and to look at the personality that can be taken over by the fascism under the influence of the archetypal power. But I mean, I see a government agency dealing with that, right? Oh yeah, well, of course, completely understand what's going on with Hitler, and but nonetheless, I'm sure the exchange was much fuller and more detailed than that. And at the same time, Jung and his family were very frightened because they knew that they were in harm's way, and that if they should be invaded by the Nazis, the Nazis would come after him for certain. And so they, I think, as I understand it, they had a place up in the Alps there where they could go and hide and help somewhat be safe. And so they were living with that. In other words, for Jung, it was not just a theoretical question. It was very much a personal question in which his life and the life of his family and his children and grandchildren, they were on the line for that. I think that must have been a terrible time for them.
Go ahead, Deborah.
Yeah, I'm one of those people who has to hear myself into sense. But so I have this chronic protest against the collective we. So that's important to know as I formulate my question. Because I heard you talk about the German people and then refer to us and what had we enabled and empowered. And I come from a narcissistic, toxic parent. So it seems to me that I smell it easily when it's in the room. So I've never been felt like I could go along from the time he had a television show till the time he nauseated me.
Right.
But I know many, 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 many people who feel similarly. And then I am astonished at the people who can watch J.D. Vance on television the other night and talk about that he was charming. They weren't nauseated, they weren't offended, they weren't. But when it comes to the we, it seems to me so important to look at where we can actually see how this happened. And it seemed to me, coming from a blue collar family in disenfranchised parts of Pennsylvania, having lived in Wisconsin and other places where there's a huge identity with being a strong working man, and watching how that got eroded over these last several years. People who would never in a million years buy a Japanese car, I mean, for decades, never do anything to undercut our steel industry, watching everything be sold out from under them, watching candidates like Hillary Clinton ignore them. You could understand where this other side came from. But I also think the role of the media, the psychological naivete of the media, of giving this man attention, and then are not being allowed to talk about the psychology, that's taboo to diagnose or to be conscious or to name the evil that is in front of us. So I get scared when we use generalities and are not parsing this as a learning experience. I don't want to be held responsible if he gets elected again. I want to do everything I can to be awake and alert. And then I have one other question that goes back to the corporate we, and that is, and my information is old, because I'm much older now, but when I was in my early 30s, I was the librarian at the U.S. Naval Academy, and the Navy was reckoning, as was the whole military, just beginning to reckon with Vietnam. Okay, my understanding after My Lai was that there was a law put in place that a soldier and anyone could legally disobey an order they found to be immoral, that was one of the results of My Lai. So I was also uncomfortable when you said we will all obey, our whole military will obey. I met a lot of honorable people who were military, and I was shocked being a feminist and a Quaker and all those things. Anyway, that's the knot of my listening, and I'm grateful for everything you said. Please understand, I just always stand outside and listen first.
No, thank you for bringing up this one, can we say, exception to the question about respect for the commanders. Yes, My Lai was a very profound moment in the history of military psychology. Now, as I was taught as an officer, and that is, I obey my commander unless
Right. You were before that. Yes.
I think goes against a deep moral sense. And that does put that responsibility upon the individual. But then and in my time, as I hope you're still there, in my time counseling on the campus, I had many young people to talk to me about being a conscientious objector. And I would support them. Now, the question that would come to them and the powers that be would be, can you provide a thought out reason for why you are a conscientious objector? The same thing there, if I am facing a command from a superior officer, if I do not agree, if I fail that, I darn well have to say, and this is the reason why. Now, that would be respected and dealt with in a court of military justice. And I know of some instances like that. But thank you for that. Is indeed a variation of the theme, so to speak, and point well taken.
But the theme is still terrifying nonetheless. I mean, I don't question your premise.
Sure.
Elliot, if you're able to start your video and open your mic, please.
Hi. Actually, for some reason, the video isn't working, even though I turned it on.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Mishoe?
Yeah, Mishoe.
Mishoe? I was reluctant to say anything, and if you don't want to hear anything, any negative comments, let me know right now.
I hear everything. You won't believe all the negative comments I hear.
I'm sorry. I'm a political person, Randall, and I am become quite cynical. But I have a few observations, and that is that Jung, at the start of the Second World War, was uncomfortable in large part from what I've read, because he was the one championing for years myths and the mythic foundation for a society, along with people like in that European era, like Joseph Campbell and others, and they were then accused of supporting the Nazis because of how they had reinvigorated over decades the interest in archetypes and mythology. But I'd note also that in Nazi Germany, it wasn't just Hitler who was possessed. They spent, because of those decades of people like Jung and Campbell and others, kind of resurrecting the old gods and the pagan gods of the Germanic tribes, and using architecture and gatherings and the Volkish movement to actually build it up over decades into a force that someone like Hitler could come. So in this country, we have a different dynamic, but similar. I mean, when we talk of Nazism, we have a situation where the Canadian Parliament stood up and applauded a Nazi who had been part of a Nazi battalion that slaughtered hundreds of thousands of Jews. They stood up and applauded him. In this country, we brought in Ukrainian Nazis and gave them honors and have them sign the flags. And since the end of World War II, we supported the Nazi movement in Ukraine, and Alan Dulles as the head of the CIA, and OSS before that. The OSS put ex-Nazi criminals in positions of power in NATO and in Eastern Europe in order to fight the communists. We have the internet and the technology companies, which are able to create mass psychoses through feeding information just to certain people and getting them to believe things like what you quoted about, the stuff you quoted about Trump. Well, that was sort of recycled from 2016 in terms of the fear mongering then. The reality is that when he got into office, he was easily manipulated by those that knew that all you had to do was flatter him, and you could get him to do whatever you wanted. In fact, when he tried to withdraw the troops from Syria, the generals deluded him into thinking they had done that, and they didn't. They didn't obey him. So a lot of this is the reality in my mind and the mind of others, is that we have marched our country to a state of fascism and totalitarianism already. It doesn't matter if it's Trump. It doesn't matter if it's whoever. We're here in that moment, and we're not recognizing that. What archetype is being manifested, I'm not exactly sure. I couldn't point to, but there is an evil that is manifesting itself with a genocide that we as a government and as a people are cheering on. we're cheering on in Congress a genocide. That archetype is what I fear. I'd like to know. Oh, and just one other little side note. Alan Dulles, one of the most evil men ever in history of the world and our country. He was friends. Well, he sent his lover and his wife to be psychoanalyzed by Jung, and he brought Jung back into this country actually to try to convince my generation that of certain things. Yeah, and I'm a fan of Jung, and I was right there with him and Wilhelm and the I Ching and all of that. I just kind of absorbed it all at that time. Anyway, I'd like to know your thoughts on anything I might have said.
Well, it's an old criticism, and it's been refuted by reliable sources, so I would encourage you to read other sources as well. That's all. Anything else tonight that we might be able to talk about?
Christine, you had your hand raised earlier. Did you have a, yeah, go ahead. And then after Christine, Judy.
This is just something, a visual thing that I noticed in the original image you showed of Wotan. He had a headdress on that was bit like large eagle wings.
Right.
And I was at a recent movie, and they were showing the entrance to a concentration camp. Maybe it was Dachau, and the image was there of those eagle wings like that. So, is that a real? Does anybody do you know if that's a real thing that they use the actual Wotan imagery in their Nazi?
I had never seen that before, that particular image, and I don't know its background, but thank you for sharing that information. I'll be interested in anything further that we find out about that.
Go ahead, Judy.
Yes, thank you, Randall. And Christina, I saw that too, and it looked like a helmet. To me, it looked like a Mercury with, I know he had winged feet, but I also saw those wings coming out, and it's curious. It seems like a god image. I wanted to comment, Elliot, when you said we have marched our country to a state of fascism already, and I just think about and how did we get here? You know, you forgive me or just bear with me if I'm paraphrasing your question, but how did we get here? And I just think over and over of our sordid and dark history as a nation. I mean, over and over and over, we have caused genocide. We have, of course, enslaved. We have trashed the earth. I mean, I could go on, and I'm sure all of you could, with just a very, it's not the shining vision on the hill. And this is, it's coming out, it's slowly coming out, and we have some lectures in the future to help us look at our history as a collective, as a nation. And, you know, maybe there's, you know, the piper is being paid. I don't know. But the, when you said that the, you know, also, was it Kay? I'm sorry, but said being ignored, you know, working blue collar people being ignored. And the poverty of spirit, poverty of soul, poverty of education. I mean, I'm not very impressed. I'm not impressed at all with our country. And there seems to be some reckoning. I guess that's really the word I want to use. Some rebalancing. And I don't know. So this Rainmaker story, so thank you, because he says, or your quote was, he came to a place which is not in order. It is not in order. And that is our nation. We are in disorder, and we have been for a very long time. Well, from the founding, on the basis of what we were founded, yeah, I'm going to get worked up now. I'm not going to do that.
Well, that's what makes the Rainmaker story so powerful, though, isn't it? He came to a place that was out of order. The natural order had been violated, and that's what we're dealing with. The
That's
natural
us.
violated. Yeah.
Yes, that's us. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you, Judy.
I think I'd like to take a turn stepping into the ring, if I may. I was thinking about the metaphor of archetype being like a water course. It might be dried up, but there's a potentiality of and it seems, if I may share, Randall, you mentioned that you're in a part of the country that's been devastated by the recent hurricane, and there are valleys, right, that people didn't imagine could have contained that much water, a torrent of water, and its destructive force. And there seems to be in the psyche of this country watercourses like that, where they have the potential to just rage, and you couldn't even imagine that people would move along with that kind of force.
Right.
There's a scale here, like 500-year floods, rapid hurricanes, and the rapidity of human destruction, or I don't know, I don't know how to describe it actually. But what are your thoughts about the scale of this kind of force?
Well, if I understand your imagery there and the specificity of that, as I was saying in the presentation, living on the coast of Carolina as I did as a child, the hurricanes. I mean, I have seen entire towns wiped out with nothing left. I mean, I remember my grandparents taking me to see this when Hurricane Hazel hit, for example. And I love that village that that I had gone to as a little child, and they had bought me ice cream and things there, and I thought they were all friendly and whatever, and it's all gone. So that capacity of nature to command and dominate is the other side of our friendly respect for the beauty of the valleys and the flowers on the hills and what have you. No, it can be very, very devastating. And there's that. I was about, in fact, when I was talking about the nature of the Tao, one description there is the balance of yin and yang. And I think that describes the Tao. Now, that there is the danger and the horror, and there's also the beauty and the capacity to celebrate what I take to be the primary values of humanity that are, I believe, courage, freedom, truth, beauty, and love. I think those are the 5 values of humanity. We say 5 because the human being is associated with the number 5, head, 2 arms, 2 legs. So those values of humanity, courage, freedom, truth, beauty, and love, I think that I do believe that we move toward them. And even though the opposites are certainly there. But I think humanity is moving toward a future that is promising, if we can survive the present.
Thank you. Rosemary, go ahead, please.
Okay. Well, I want to just ask you, first of all, just where in Jung's writing does the Wotan thing occur? Which volume, and where do you find it?
Yes, the best place to find that is the 2-volume set called Visions. And the visions in those two books encompass early lectures that he did. And you'll find a wonderful treatment of that story of the Rainmaker there in I think it's volume 1 of the 2-volume set, Visions, simply Visions. It's very few people know about those 2 volumes, strangely enough. Now, it's very early Jung, he's doing his lectures in his early seminars, but it's very, very rich stuff. And out of that comes the story of the Rainmaker.
Okay, that's great. Well, I wanted to mention to you that one of the interesting things about South Africa is that after the terrible history of South Africa with the Boers and the English and the treatment of both Indians and the native African Americans, there was a thing that happened after Mandela's election called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
Right.
And that went on for years, in which people came up in front of that commission, told what they had done, what they regretted, what they wanted to make amends for, both Black and white, and whatever people had been involved in the atrocities. And there was something that happened in doing that, and the whole country watching it happen, and the fact that it wasn't something quick at all. Trevor Noah speaks about it in some of his little talks, in which he mentioned that when people spoke back about it, Black or white, they would say, yes, those were terrible times. And they were both agreeing that they were looking back on something horrendous that they had all participated in. And I would say with Judy that this country has never come to terms with its genocide of the native peoples, and never come to terms with what it's done with its African American people and the slavery and things, and the stuff that's still going on today with the kinds of things where maternal deaths among Black women are 3 times what they are among white women, the kinds of schools that I went to back in the 50s are now aren't top of the line. They're very much skewed. The rich kids get good schooling, the poor kids get very poor schooling. So I think there is something that a country can do, the way Germany came to terms with the Holocaust, by discussing it in schools, and everybody was required to sit through those discussions. And Michael Moore documented some of those in his movie, Where to Invade Next, where you can see those kids just being horrified by what they were made to face as part of their own history. And again, this has never occurred in this country. So I mean, this country doesn't even know that its own constitution is based on the Iroquois, much more than it's based on European law.
Right.
And so there's something about this naivete, this kind of youthful obsession with materialism and with we're the best and we're the top and this and that, that is very, very strange, and sort of takes the place of inward looking. It may be because we're an extroverted culture, is focused on going west, conquering, always, it's not working out here, we move on, move on, move on. There's a sort of a very, very kind of youthful thing that's kind of fun, but at the same time, it's basically unconnected to other things. That it seems to me that Eliot is speaking to a fascism that, yes, that is already here, but at the same time, there's all these other possibilities.
Yes.
So to the extent that, I think your work is pretty amazing, and I'm so happy that you brought it to us tonight, because I feel like that was like a whole new understanding of what it is to be possessed by this archetype, and to sort of watch it happen, just with people saying, well, the economy is what really matters, and that's what I base my vote on. And it's like, whoa, that's it? That's what you're going to give up everything else that matters to you, your freedom, your country, your values, just in order because you think you'll make a bigger buck when Trump is president? It's a strange mindset that doesn't understand fully even the history of the country. And then I have to remind myself that kids are not even taught government in school anymore.
That's right.
They don't even attend, they don't even have that as a senior class that they must do before they graduate. And they used to, they used to have that. So anyway, there's a very important discussion here. So I'm very glad that you came tonight.
Thank you, Rosemary. And I was wondering, talking about South Africa, one of my early supervisors was Ethne Gray from South Africa. Did you know Ethne? Wonderful, wonderful. I'm sure Penelope did. Wonderful, wonderful lady. Very, very beautiful little lady. And I've heard a number of stories about South Africa. And I thought, well, I'm getting a geographical lesson every time Ethne would speak. Grand stories. But thank you, Rosemary.
Go ahead, Penelope.
Thank you, Randall. I don't want to say a lot, but what's so obvious to me is the missing feminine, missing Eros.
Yeah.
I don't remember the actual story of Wotan, where he came from, his story. I don't know that. But it seems that what's so obviously missing in all this is the feminine, women, Eros, connection, compassion. That's the balance. And I actually think women are quite activated at this time. And I don't think they're going to lie down easily. I don't think they're going to lie down easily, no matter what happens. And I think Mother Nature is speaking in her voice.
Yeah.
And she's bigger than all of us. We're part of her. And we have got to listen. I mean, people, we've got to listen. Anyway, delving in so honestly and saying these things, I think I knew right away. Deb said something about smelling narcissism and authoritarianism. And when the Republicans in 2016 put the Russian platform in, I knew we were way off course. And it isn't just Trump, it's an enormous amount of people and money behind the scenes that are very much carrying this. So it's, we're really out of balance.
Yes, we are.
Our work personally and collectively is to find the balance, find the truth of our history, be truthful. We have to come to terms with what we've done with people of color in this country, particularly. And I absolutely think that healing's possible, but we're in. Trump always wanted chaos. He always wanted chaos, and it's the opposite of order. So we need to stay ordered to meet the chaos. So anyway, that's short comment. Thank you.
Thank you. And you inspire me to add something I had not, and that is the way of the dream. I think that we do have a resource in our dreams, and I think that helps us to focus our life and come back to true center. And it's so meaningful to me. I have a dream group. They've been together. They were supposed to rotate out every year. They've been together now 35 years, and nobody wants to rotate out. So, but the advantage of that is they know each other pretty well. And, there's not much that gets by there that's not present. But, and again, to your point, with that group that's been together so long, there's a lot of eros. And that
helps. There it is, right there.
Male and female.
It's a circle. It's a circle. It's a circle. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Erica.
Yeah. I just want to go back a minute, because after World War I, the German people were just devastated, and they were given no help. They were just, the economy was destroyed, the country was destroyed, and it's out of that degradation, shame, poverty that Hitler was able to rise.
Yes.
And what Hitler was brilliant at was channeling the mythology of the German people.
Yes.
And Wotan was the god, and he took on the god, And he was brilliant. They were brilliant at channeling the rituals and the mythology to bring in the German people to have hope. And I don't think Trump is smart enough to do that. I don't think he channels anything but chaos, as Pat
Right.
said.
Right.
And I was trying to think, what is the archetype of chaos that Trump is channeling, trying to channel? You know, I mean, that's all he does. That's all he knows how to do. And that's why I don't think he's going to prevail in the end, because he doesn't have the brilliance to channel he channels the MAGA people who are all traumatized and want to, you know, are caught in the trauma that Trump's caught in. But so I was trying to think of what archetype is he trying to work with, and I don't think he has any. I think that's, thank God he doesn't, or goddess, thank goddess he doesn't have any. Any comment, any thoughts?
Well, I do believe, though, that he respects power and money, and of course claims to have more of each than he does actually have that. So I think there is the and he likes conflict. So I would say that idea of chaos probably would be located within an archetypal dynamic of power, of war and authoritarianism. I think it's not refined that much, but I think it's there very much with him. He does like conflict and destruction. And he loves dictators.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Danny.
Okay, thank you very much. This has been very rich, and so hopefully I can form some thoughts around some of the things. Going back to the narcissistic personality disorder and having experienced that firsthand as a system in a marriage, and then through channels within Jung teaching and Jung analysis, finding a method to break that. So I have a very small experience with that, but as a collective, which is what I'd prefer to talk about, being that we're talking about archetypes in bigger bodies, that there's a lot of people that gather around Trump as a notion that they're serving a purpose, a good purpose, a believable purpose. And that's the real danger of the narcissist, is that they sort of control an idea that's a believable purpose. And so my personal one didn't start breaking until I stopped participating in it, which was a hard thing to do. It was a process of individuation. And so in that, and one of the things I'm hearing in this is that the breaking, I think, is that how it's put, the breaking of the psyche? Is that how Jung stated it? His quote,
the psyche is in peril, and that our security hangs on a thin thread.
Right.
And that is the psyche. Yeah.
And so here we talk about like all of the things, all of the shames that we carry as a species.
Right.
It's kind of like the psyche has been broken by a death of 1,000 cuts.
Oh, that's well said. Well
And
said.
talking about the 1,000 cuts isn't going to change that. And so what my personal calling seems to be, especially in this situation, talking about this publicly, is that, in going back to Elric's question about the Holy Grail, is who does it serve? And we are a collective body that is serving a lot of things that have no real merit. We believe in them and we serve them, but this notion of serving, like you just mentioned, dreams, or the core of what the psyche and the collective unconscious, and or even the word God as a true sense, isn't what we're serving anymore. We're all serving money, power, Trump, shame. We serve all these different characteristics of our woundedness. But there's no that's what the Grail has become for us. And so I'm wondering, and I don't know if there's a question in this, but yeah, I guess I am wondering, is that how that's kind of how I see where we are at this point up against this big movement of Wotan. I don't know much about any of it, but that the way out of it is to begin to understand our souls and the instructions that our individual souls are going to give to us, or even collectively. I mean, your body of 35 dream seekers for, you know, all these years, like what is the unconscious suggesting that we do? Not what do I think I should do? Not should I beat myself up for being a white male, but what is my dream telling me? Where are we being guided to confront this dark force that's bigger than the individual? That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Yes, Danny, as I was following that if I understood it correctly, you did withdraw from participation and the earlier stage of your life. You withdrew that to honor your own soul. I'm wondering how you did that. Where did you find the courage to withdraw? Did you have anybody who worked with you with that? Have you journeyed alone, or do you have others who journey with you?
No, actually, I saw some Jungian analysis, one of which who is here, and little by little being guided by that part of my unconscious or part of my soul, whatever, was to learn how to follow that path.
Yes, yes, yes.
It
Okay.
eventually gave me the courage to stand up, and it was a bloody battle. I didn't participate in most of it, but the breaking of my marriage and the constructs that was there was pretty terrifying.
Yeah.
To go up against by myself. I mean, I was given the courage through working with some people, but so.
Well, there is that theme right there, though, of the courage. It took courage to do what you did.
Mhm.
I applaud that. I applaud that.
But I think as a collective body too, that's where we're at. The way to stop is to stop participating in a system that's narcissistic, because it seems like a good idea. But to maybe start to find a large enough body to go up against the Wotan, to pray for it, to seek it, to look for it in our hearts. Penelope was just talking about the feminine. I mean, the resources are there, but we're so focused on something intellectual. So anyways, I should stop. Thank you very much for your talk. This has been good.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Christine, go ahead, please.
Yes, I wanted to go back to Rosemary's bringing up the Truth and Reconciliation work in South Africa.
Right.
Just to say that I personally had the good fortune of one time when I served on a jury, the judge was training us in this way of justice, and it's just so I don't know what the word is, but to have an accuser meet in person, the person that they have wronged, and to have the two individual people meet with their full feeling and their full, experience. And I mean, that's where healing can happen. And I just think that's such an incredible model for, and that a country engaged in. So I find that hopeful. I'm glad that you brought that up, Rosemary.
Elric and then Penelope.
I listening to this has been such a rich conversation. What a wonderful group of people we have tonight. Thank you all. And I just wanted to say that as I listened and I rolled around with the question that we're all rolling around with, the question of what's to be done. It seems to me that in the world of opposites, which I would refer to as tandems rather than opposites, they arise mutually together, that when facing something large and overwhelming, its opposite tandem is something small and accessible. And what is small and accessible is that part within ourselves that we have the power and authority to work with. And I come back to what you said earlier, Randall, in your presentation when you were speaking about the Tao and you told the story of the Rainmaker. Because it brings me back over and over again to when I'm feeling this overwhelm in the face of world events and narratives that are so much larger than me, I will never be able to stop them or hold them steady. They're tidal waves that are rolling through. That the answer is right here in the sense that if you go within and order yourself, bring order to your own self in the temple of yourself, that's a very, very powerful thing to do. Jung recognized it when he said the most powerful thing you can do politically is to individuate. I think that's something that I personally just want to hold on to tonight in making this whole discussion with everybody, that the answer is very close and there isn't a need to feel hopeless or helpless. One can do something within oneself to come to presence, to come to deal with the problems that are external by dealing with them internally.
Yes, and that is the Tao, is it not?
It is.
That's the experience of the Tao, yes. Powerful.
Go ahead, Judith. Judith, you're muted.
I also wanted to add to what Elric was stating. First of all, I want to say thank you. This was really great. I really appreciate it. And I do feel, yeah, it was just, I really love that story, The Rainmaker. And I wanted to add on to Elric, what you were saying in terms of the Tao. And I do believe that this is a time absolutely to be inside, to really be in alignment and with nature and to really come inside and listen. But I also feel, and to be with our shadow parts and all of that and individuate, but I also feel community is really important. And even doing the work together in community and how important community is at this time. I just wanted to state that. And I also earlier, there was a little bit of a discussion about, the god of chaos. Who's that god of chaos? Well, it's just sort of interesting because I don't know of a god of chaos in that construct. That I know of. But it's interesting because Wonder Woman, the 2017 film, right? Because it's like myths are now being reinvented for younger people to enjoy and for older people, the Marvel and different characters like that. And it was interesting because she had to fight in that first film the god Ares, who they shifted into a god of chaos. So I'm not saying that we have answers within the Marvel universe on any level, but I'm just saying that these gods and goddesses are being reimagined for this time, for younger, at least, yeah, for everybody really, because it's in the media. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Judith. Yes, indeed. I think that because it is archetypal, it may have a new face and a new setting, but the archetypal theme is timeless. So I'm glad to know Wonder Woman resurfaced.
Go ahead, Judy, and then Penelope.
Actually, maybe Penelope was first, I think. But yeah, I'll just say thinking isn't necessarily my strong suit, but when I start to reflect on the idea of the Tao and trying not to think it, like overthink it, because of the admonition of, those who name
Don't
don't know, right? And several times tonight, and certainly in your presentation, there's this reference to the Tao, and it is mind-boggling to me, mind-boggling, to kind of imagine that what happens here in my psyche. And I've been in analysis for a very long time, and I believe this, but when I try to think about it, I think, how does that work?
Right.
It's so I wonder, if we slip away from that and think, oh, there has to be something else, I have to do something else. Which, of course, if you're in the Tao, I'm sure I imagine it informs right action. I'm sure that makes sense to me, but that there are reverberations from, or that we're connected, or, Indra's web. It's pretty mind-boggling. So, yeah, I don't really, I'm not able to be, I'm not in a group of people very often where that concept is recognized for its power and depth. And Elric, I know you keep saying this to us. You've said this to us as a group many times, and I know it's really, really important. And yet a part of me just goes, wow, how can that be? So I guess I'm in awe.
Well, Judy, I would encourage you to draw it, to paint it, to sketch it. You don't have to give it words. And I imagine you could do that and then see how that feels, what comes to you with that.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And when I heard the story, when I hear the story of the Rainmaker, I think, well, these people, they call this man the Rainmaker, so they believe this person is capable of bringing rain, so there's a projection onto this person that they can cause the rain. So perhaps he is moving into the right order, he's coming into right ordered being, and yet it affects him. So then I start thinking, wow, what is our relationship to leaders and leadership? And when that person, is in, as an example of someone, a Buddha or a Christ or a deep and wise teachers. So then we can, but that's another whole dynamic of the way that we could align ourselves. And leaders, Mandela was mentioned already, leaders have had ripple effects. Martin Luther King, many, there are many. So yeah.
Penelope, I'm sorry. Penelope and then Deborah.
I wanted Deborah to go ahead of me. Go ahead, Deborah.
Sure. I have another little messy knot because I was pinging on things that other people said, but I had a reaction or whatever, not a disagreement, when it was so beautifully articulated about the individual. And I totally want to agree with that. But when you're in the constellation of the narcissist, if anybody's paying attention, those are the people who he hates most. Those are the people he will tear apart. If he can't get you, he'll get your spouse. If he can't get her, he'll get her career. Thinking about, but then the people who rise above that, I mean, Cassandra, who's going to campaign with Kamala, Liz Cheney, who lost her seat and campaigned with Kamala, Adam Kinzlinger, who lost his seat and stands fast, Jamie Raskin, who lost his son and became part of that committee. So I'm thinking about that. But what also came up with that, I'm a former children's librarian and wanted to be an analyst, and so had this projection onto analysts that they are hearing loads of dreams and hearing the patterns of loads of dreams and hearing the dreams of many intuitives. And then I would always wonder, well, isn't this category of people who see things coming? And the way I'm linking that to being a children's librarian is that if you're paying attention 20 years ago and 10 years or more than 10 years ago, first Harry Potter and then the Hunger Games came through, and they were massively popular. And they are about a chaos-wielding, narcissistic, totally destructive, consuming leader and what it takes to bring one down. In fact, it's the first generation has already been so wounded that it's the next generation that has to take up, or they're not wounded, they certainly coach the next generation, but we're in the second generation in both books. And the Voldemort and President Snow and President Coin are all taken down at enormous price to individuals, to the most individuated people. You lose the most beloved characters in these, or some of them, and the one who shoots the final arrow pays an enormous price. So I'm just a little bit afraid of you go in and do your own work and you'll be safe. Do you know what I'm saying? They can smell you too. Do you know what I mean? I'm generalizing brutally, but I'm just saying that that individual work is threatening, I think, to someone who wants to control a collective by power. Am I making any sense? You maybe never read those children's books.
No, you are. I think, however, and please be mindful of how I might be saying this. I am still standing.
Yes.
I am still
yes.
standing.
And so are they. Yes.
And I plan to continue to stand.
Yes.
And I have found that what my wife and I did, we recognize we are dealing with oppressive power, and we are dealing with forces that would attack us.
Yes.
In addition to the psychological work, to the spiritual work, what I found very meaningful, and we have to all find our way to do this, but we do a martial art called Aikido.
Mm-hmm.
And Aikido is a wonderful, wonderful martial art. And we do sword forms and many things. Now that was an awakening for us to say, we can be active here in facing the dark force and bring it on.
Yeah.
Bring it on.
I don't disagree. I just didn't want to be selling. I don't disagree at all. It's the story can read horrible. The prices can read horribly, and there's nothing you'd exchange for having stood.
Yes.
Free. Yeah.
So we can all stand.
Mm-hmm.
We can stand.
Thank you.
Penelope, did you want to speak?
No, you go ahead and I'll speak next.
Okay. So there's been reference to the American Indian experience. I want to make that more pronounced. Ned Blackhawk in Rediscovering America, he's an indigenous author, very clearly draws a connection to Nazi Germany and describes how the Nazis studied what happened here as a blueprint for genocide. So the deep shadow on this land, literally on this land, that is now emerging is also a part of a much larger process. So part of what makes it possible, Randall, I think, going back to that river courses analogy, there are river courses all around that could become a torrent at any time. And have not been addressed here in our country. There are some brave people who have brought things to light, but on the whole, as a totality in society, this is a deep shadow.
Yes, that's very, very, very true.
I'm sorry, that wasn't really a question. Let me try again. What hope is there for us? I think you've already kind of signaled standing as an individuated self in love and truth and beauty. What that's in the individual frame. What's the hope for us in the collective frame?
Well, and encouragement, and maybe this has taken place in your wonderful group of people I've met tonight, but I encourage everyone to have a dream group. Dream, we can run, but we cannot hide. So dreams keep us honest. And if we have a trustworthy group that we are with, and we do some readings. I'm not advocating this to say, mine is an outstanding way. We had their different models, but each year with our dream group, we have a particular book that we read. So we do a didactic piece along with our experiential dream work. And then we have 2 hours each week that we meet in person or online. And then we refer to the didactic stuff that we're reading. So we're putting in new content. We're also dealing with relationships of conflict within our group, but conflict in society, and conflict as it appears in dreams. Such a rich nexus there, you see, of dealing with symbolic material and real social dynamics. And when those come together, that's where things happen. It happens. And we had to be prepared for it. So I am confident that you can do this, all of you, and maybe you already are doing that. If you're not, I strongly encourage you to get in a dream group of 2, 3, 4, 5. I never liked a group larger than 6 people. Myself makes a 7th. And once you get beyond that, then it begins to water down. So you had to be careful to limit the size of the group. But I'd say do the dream groups and do some reading, have people who support you, and be honest with each other and be honest with yourself. Yeah.
Penelope, please go ahead.
I wanted to share a few things. When Trump was first elected, not long after that, I had a dream of Trump was on a tower and he lightning struck or whatever, but he fell off the tower. He came down was the message. He didn't die, but he came down. So that was one. Another was I was sitting next to him. I don't remember, it was a movie or something. And what came clear is how lonely he was. He was utterly lonely and unable to connect. I mean, it was heartbreakingly sad. I'm still hoping my initial dream, my psyche's initial message eventually happens. Another thing is I'm a poll worker, and I had my first experience of working with the ballots. I had 500 ballots, and I fed them into the very elegant, carefully calibrated machine. And when I left after 500, I realized it was like communion. It was extraordinarily sacred to hold those ballots and keep this orderly process going and be centered. And I was in service to something much greater. And I'm looking forward to the day of that election. The other thing I was thinking is, you know, there is so much happening all at once, and between the media and the danger, but the media, we're flooded with this seeing this man and his chaos and whatnot. We have to feed the other parts. We can't just pay attention to him. And in some ways, you know, it's all happening at once. The past, the present, the future, it's all simultaneous. So we have to really realize there's so much more happening than just this. And we can't forget that. This is a great lesson that we're all going through. We'll all be changed somehow. And we have to hold hands. This is when we hold hands. So thank you. Thank you for coming and stirring this up.
Thank you. Yes, that draws us to our 9 o'clock hour. And I just wish to extend my thanks and the thanks of the whole group, Dr. Mishoe, for your wonderful evening, and to the group for such a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. Best wishes to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Be good.
Good night to all.